House will be in order. The prayer will be offered by our chaplain, Father Conroy.
Let us pray. Loving and gracious God, we give you thanks for giving us another day. We ask today that you bless the members of this assembly to be the best and most faithful servants of the people they serve. Purify their intentions, that they will say what they believe and act consistent with their words. Help them indeed, help us all, to be honest with themselves so that they will be concerned not only with how their words and deeds are weighed by others, but also with how their words and deeds affect the lives of those in need and those who look to them for support, help, strength, and leadership. May all that is done this day in the people's house be for your greater honor and glory. Amen.
The Chair has examined the journal of the last day's proceedings and announces to the House his approval thereof. Pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, the journal stands approved. What purpose does the gentleman from New York rise?
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Clause 1, Rule 1, I demand a vote on the Speaker's approval of the journal.
The question is on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the journal. Those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, say no. The ayes have it, and the journal stands approved.
Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from New York.
I object to the vote on the grounds that a quorum is not present and make a point of order that a quorum is not present.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question are postponed. Allegiance will be led by the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Hahn.
Please join with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The Chair will entertain up to 15 requests for one-minute speeches on each side of the aisle. What purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
1 minute, revise and extend.
Without objection, the gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, before Congress left Washington in December, we asked the President a simple question. Will he stop blocking the Keystone XL pipeline? Congress established laws to govern pipeline approval. The State Department published regulations, and typically approval takes 18 to 24 months. However, Keystone has been sitting on the shelf for more than 40 months now. The President, ignoring standard procedures, ordered duplicative environmental reviews that would extend the approval process to more than 52 months. Is this because Keystone is unprecedented? No. TransCanada has already built and operates a pipeline that crosses the U.S. border. Additionally, thousands of pipelines already crisscross the proposed route. The difference is the political pressure brought by extreme environmental groups. Politics is blocking tens of thousands of new jobs. Politics is blocking a reliable new source of energy. It's time to stop letting politics stand in the way of a project that could help grow our economy. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentlelady from New York seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlelady from New York is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Over the last few weeks, I've traveled constantly throughout my 26th district of New York, meeting business owners and talking to them about their challenges that they're facing in this particular climate. Right now, they're frustrated with the various levels of government they have to go through to get an answer out of our federal government. It's become so burdensome that there are actually 80 different economic development agencies, 4 different departments, and in fact there's 47 different job training programs. These businesses have enough on their minds and have enough challenges before them without having to solve this problem. Fortunately, the President has come up with a plan. Last week, President Obama proposed consolidating 6 various entities into one-stop shop for businesses, for trade, and so they can get their questions answered without having complications. This is something I support, my local chambers of commerce support, and that's why I'm calling on this body. Let's take up this plan. Let's give the people in my district, a Republican district I might add, what they're looking for. Streamline our government, reduce the cost of government, save taxpayer dollars, one-stop shop for our businesses, and for once and for all, let's demonstrate to the American people that we have the capability to work together. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman's time's expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from South Carolina rise?
Consent to address the House 1 minute, revising SIMR.
Without objection, gentleman from South Carolina is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, in early 2009, the President assured the nation that his bill, which provides for stimulus, which has failed, the borrowing spending would reduce unemployment and it would not exceed 8%. January marks the 35th straight month that the nation's unemployment rate has remained above 8%. Last year, House Republicans followed through with their commitment to the American people and passed 28 job-creating bills, most with bipartisan support. All of these pieces of legislation remain stalled in the liberal-controlled Senate, where bills are denied debate or a vote. Because of the gridlock in the Senate and the President's failed policies, the American people are losing faith in government officials. As we begin a new year, I hope the Senate will take immediate action for the American people by passing legislation that promotes jobs. In conclusion, God bless our troops, and we will never forget September 11th and the global war on terrorism.
Gentleman yields back. For what purposes, the gentlelady from California seek recognition? To address the House for 1 minute. Without objection, gentlelady from California is recognized for 1 minute.
I came here today wanting to wish everybody a happy new year. But when I came, I found out that our Republican Congress wanted to give everybody an unhappy old year, continuing last year's agenda of no jobs for you. They ended last year not with a bang but a whimper as they walked out on a deal to stop a tax hike on the middle class right before the holidays. Even though Senate Republicans had agreed to a compromise, House Republicans were willing to abandon you just as you were trying to figure out how to pay for gifts for your children. They were serious about letting the payroll tax and unemployment benefits expire. Thank goodness you expressed your outrage and they were forced to change their position. They gave a 2-month extension. Now, in just over a month, they'll be faced with the same choice, to raise taxes for the middle class or finally work together with Democrats to give real relief to Americans like you. Make sure they do the right thing.
Gentlelady yields back. For what purposes, the gentleman from North Carolina seek recognition? Without objection, gentleman from North Carolina is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, last month I was a sick pup. This month I am a recovering pup. During my sick pup days, I became beneficiary of cards and letters from well-wishers, personal visits, telephone calls, and emails. Many of these expressions originated here in the People's House. And the purpose of my 1 minute today is to convey my expression of appreciation to my colleagues, Democrats and Republicans, for their generous support during that period. I thank you for the time, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For what purposes, the gentlelady from California seek recognition? Without objection, gentlelady from California is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's 2012, and this is the year we need to create jobs and get our economy moving again. Without a growing economy, our budget deficit will only get worse. It's time that we boldly invest in America. My friends on the Democratic side want to invest in education and infrastructure, creating jobs now and building our future. My Republican friends, on the other hand, want to cut spending on Social Security and Medicare. The Democrats, we want the wealthiest of Americans to pay their fair share, and my friends on the Republican side oppose even asking the wealthiest Americans to pay their fair share. We need to make the right choices this year. Let's invest in America. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield my time.
The gentlelady yields back. For what purposes, the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition?
Request permission to address the House for 1 minute and unanimous consent to revise the agenda.
Without objection, gentleman from Illinois is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, today I rise to honor the life of Specialist Christopher Patterson. Christopher, a 2009 graduate of West Aurora High School in Illinois, came from a military family. He joined the National Guard while studying music education at Valparaiso University, but in his own words, he didn't join the Guard just for money for school. He joined to serve his country. His conviction to serve was so strong that he chose to join his Guard unit overseas when they were sent to Afghanistan, even though he could have stayed behind to continue his studies. Just 3 weeks ago, Christopher and 3 other soldiers were working in the Kandahar province of Afghanistan to clear combat routes for convoys to pass through when an IED detonated and took his life. Today we honor Christopher and the ultimate sacrifice he paid for our country and give our thoughts and prayers to his family and friends during this difficult time. We are and will remain eternally grateful for Christopher's service and sacrifice to to our country. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey seek recognition?
Permission to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to congratulate the West New York, New Jersey School District for their efforts to promote nutrition and physical education at school as part of the Healthy Schools program. Last week, President Clinton visited PS No. 2 in West New York to praise the Board of Education for its efforts in transforming the school system's nutritional program. This was part of the Alliance for a Healthy School program to reduce childhood obesity. During his visit, President Clinton was able to see firsthand how the school has embraced nutrition and wellness. West New York has a history of being recognized by the Alliance for Nutritional Achievement. PS No. 2 received a Bronx National Recognition Award in 2009 and a Silver National Recognition Award in 2010 for their efforts to provide students with a fresher, more nutritional meal plan. In 2010, my high school alma mater, Memorial High School, received the first and only Gold National Recognition Award given by the Alliance. And last October, the Alliance awarded Sal Valencia, the Food Service Director of West New York, with the distinction of the Healthy Schools Program Champion. I am honored to represent a school district that emphasizes healthy lifestyle. I am pleased that West New York has been recognized for their efforts. May you back.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Indiana seek recognition? Without objection, gentleman from Indiana is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to bring to light a problem that's facing my constituents in Clinton, Indiana. Feather Creek floods over 100 times per year, damaging the same homes year after year. In 2008, many of the homes filled completely with water, leaving only their roofs to be recognizable. The Army Corps of Engineers has been working on the project for many years, including numerous environmental studies, surveys of the land, but the flooding does continue. The Army Corps, to their credit, held a town hall last week in Clinton where they heard from over 300 residents about the damage to this flooding that has been the flooding has been causing them for decades. The estimated cost of the project is $900,000. I do appreciate the willingness of the Army Corps of Engineers, specifically Colonel Leonard, to meet with my staff and constituents, and I urge the Corps to remember what they heard in Clinton, Indiana last week and complete the Feather Creek project as quickly as possible. My constituents deserve no less than a safe environment free from the threats of yearly floods. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition? Without objection, gentleman from New York is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to discuss an issue of great importance to Western New York, the Buffalo Bills. The Bills have one of the most dedicated fan bases of any football franchise in the entire country. Since 1960, Bills fans have embraced and supported the team both emotionally and financially. Today, the Buffalo Bills franchise is an integral part of the New York State economy. But harsh blackout provisions threaten New Yorkers' ability to watch their team on television. The blackout rule requires that a stadium be sold out 72 hours in advance in order to broadcast a football game locally. In Buffalo, this means that in order to avoid a blackout, the Bills must sell more tickets than the league average in one of the league's smallest markets. Last year, almost half of the Bills' home games were blacked out. This is unacceptable. This morning, I sent a letter to the FCC chairman asking that he eliminate this unfair rule, which does not provide for individual solutions to different local markets. The FCC has opened a public comment period on this matter, and I urge fans who feel similarly to do the same. In the meantime, I will continue this fight. I yield back the balance of my time.
For purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition? Without objection, gentleman from Texas is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A few minutes ago, the White House announced that it was going to reject the Keystone XL pipeline. The White House did this among a backdrop with record high gas prices in January. A major factor in these high gas prices is the continued political upheaval in the Middle East and the impact that it's having on economic uncertainty around the world. Keystone would bring nearly 1 million barrels of oil from our friendly neighbor Canada to the north, and also up to 100,000 barrels of oil from the Bakken discoveries in Montana and North Dakota. It would also put more Americans to work while improving our energy security. The Department of Energy has stated that gasoline prices and all markets served by the Gulf Coast and East Coast refiners would decrease as a result of the pipeline's construction. The White House would be well advised to consider a poll that I took in a recent teletown hall of our constituents, where 87% of the constituents said that they strongly supported the Keystone XL pipeline. We cannot wait for more jobs and for better economic uncertainty for all generations. Thank you. I yield back.
Expired. For what purpose the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of the construction of the Keystone XL pipeline. I ask that the President reconsider his reported rejection of this project. This project will increase employment while reducing our dependence on overseas oil. Canada has already made its decision. The pipeline is going to be built. The question is whether it lands on the Gulf Coast of the United States or the west coast of Canada. And make no mistake, if it ends up on Canada's coast, that oil will only continue westward to China and their markets. The jobs and the economic benefit of the pipeline would then be lost here in the United States. Mr. Speaker, this pipeline is a foregone conclusion. Who will benefit is not. This is a chance to employ Americans and help protect them in a volatile oil market. I ask the President to reconsider his reported rejection of this project.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Request permission to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, gentleman from Texas is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, there is disturbing news today regarding our national security and economic security. Politico reports that the administration will say no to the Keystone XL pipeline today. So no to thousands of union and non-union jobs to build the pipeline, and no to refinery jobs in southeast Texas. No to obtaining oil from a reliable nation and ally like Canada. But yes to more oil from dictators like Chavez from Venezuela. Yes to being held hostage to Middle Eastern oil and dictators like Ahmadinejad, who now threatens to stop oil tankers from going through the Straits of Hormuz. And yes to insulting Canada. The Prime Minister of Canada says that he will build a pipeline, but now it will go to his west coast, and that crude oil will be loaded on Chinese tankers. China, our national enemy regarding and competitor regarding economy. Isn't that a lovely decision? If the administration chooses to say no to Keystone XL, the administration chooses poorly, and that's just the way it is.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Massachusetts seek recognition? Without objection, gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized for 1 minute.
As we debate our national budget, we must address one of the largest costs threatening our economy and bankrupting our families, the Alzheimer's pandemic. 5.4 million Americans suffer from Alzheimer's today. And as all the baby boomers retire, 15 million Americans will have Alzheimer's. We already spend $130 billion a year on Alzheimer's from Medicare and Medicaid. At this rate, in 2050, we will spend $800 billion every year from Medicare and Medicaid on this one disease alone. That is more than the entire defense budget today. Thankfully, right now, the Advisory Council for the National Alzheimer's Project Act is developing the first ever comprehensive national plan to fight this disease. We cannot cut funding for medical research for Alzheimer's today if we want to balance the budget tomorrow. We made a vow to care for our citizens as they age. NIH is the National Institutes
Gentleman's time's expired.
We must not cut that budget, or else all of these families with Alzheimer's will have no hope.
Gentleman's time's expired. For what purpose, the gentleman from Arizona seek recognition? Without objection, gentleman from Arizona is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's not too often that a President of the United States has the opportunity, with one swipe of his pen, to increase private sector jobs by thousands of employees, while at the same time increasing our energy independency and our energy security. But that's exactly what's going to happen with the Keystone XL pipeline. Unfortunately, the President earlier this year punted on that decision and punted it past 2013, even though his own State Department said that there would not be a significant impact on the environment. But we gave him another chance. Unfortunately, there are reports that he will reject the permit for the Keystone XL pipeline. And the thing is that what's confusing, Mr. Speaker, is that he's been saying that we can't wait for job creation. But with this decision, he's saying that we can wait for thousands and thousands of private sector jobs here in the United States, and that we can wait for energy security. Mr. Speaker, this is the wrong decision at the wrong time. We need better decisions from the administration, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. For purposes, the gentlelady from the District of Columbia seek recognition. Without objection, gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker asks the average American, what should be the first vote in the House? For sure, she would say extend payroll tax, unemployment insurance, and the doc fix. What is our first bill? Disapproval of raising the debt ceiling? For what? To remind Americans that Tea Party Republicans brought us the loss of our AAA rating for the first time in American history? New year demands a new start. The payroll tax is the best way to eat into Congress's 84% disapproval rating. Do the inevitable, no poison pills. Any add-ons will be understood as just that by every American who draws a salary or who is unemployed or who is a senior. Do it to get it over with and get on with a year of working on jobs. Come over to the side of the street with the 99%. You may grow to like it.
The gentlelady yields back. For purposes, the gentleman from Colorado seek recognition. Without objection, gentleman from Colorado is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, according to the Canadian government, over 143,000 jobs in Colorado depend on our trade relationship with Canada. Further, crude petroleum is Colorado's top import from our neighbor to the north. And Colorado is not unique. Many of the jobs and energy around the country come as a result of our relationship with Canada. It's been 3 years since the application was filed to build the Keystone XL pipeline, which would create a pipeline that extends from the oil sands in Alberta to the Gulf Coast, bringing significant oil supplies into the United States. The United States as a whole, both economically and from a national security standpoint, will benefit immensely from the approval of this pipeline. In my mind, it's a very simple question. Why import oil from countries that seek to do us harm when we can get it from our neighbor to the north? I'm continuously awed at how much energy potential we have in North America and how simple it would be to advance policies that would make us more energy independent. Isn't that what we're trying to accomplish? But apparently there is an asterisk when it comes to job creation for this administration. Not these jobs, not these 100,000 jobs, perhaps some others. This administration has done everything it can to stand in the way of a project that can help 100,000 Americans get back to work.
Gentleman's time's expired.
Mr. President, don't put a cork in our economy. Let's get this pipeline built.
Members are reminded to address their remarks to the chair and not to the president or other members of the body. What purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, gentleman from New York is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in frustration, frustrated with the lack of compassion for the middle class coming out of this body, frustrated with the lack of ideas and focus on job creation, and frustrated with the continued partisanship and division that have led to some of the lowest levels of confidence and trust for this body in its history. America deserves better than this, Mr. Speaker. 160 million middle-class individuals deserve to have their payroll tax cut extended through the end of this year. Those who have lost their jobs through no fault of their own deserve to know that they will be able to continue to have a lifeline in the time of need. And seniors deserve to know that they can visit their doctor of choice without worrying whether or not Medicare will cover the visit. America and Americans don't deserve more wasted time. Instead of a vote today on the debt ceiling, one that is partisan, divisive, and ultimately dead on arrival in the other chamber, we should be focusing on jobs and creating jobs and protecting the middle class. Think of it, 61% of Americans always or usually live paycheck to paycheck, which has risen from 43% in 2007. Mr. Speaker, I'm frustrated with the American people being also frustrated. It's time this body come together, put politics aside, and work on growing jobs. With that, I yield back my time.
What purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition? Without objection, gentleman from Texas is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, while the President campaigns on his "We Can't Wait" slogan, American workers are still asking, where are the jobs? The President knows that 20,000 true shovel-ready jobs, American jobs, can be created by approving construction of the Keystone XL pipeline. Why is he rejecting 20,000 American jobs? Why is he not reducing our dependence upon Middle Eastern sources of oil? Why is he not increasing our energy security, which increases our national security? Why isn't he taking our debt crisis seriously by increasing revenue from taxpayers with American jobs? Why is he not listening to the American people? Mr. Speaker, the American people deserve better from their president. He should focus on the 20,000 new jobs he could help create, not the one he wants to keep. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Hawaii seek recognition?
Request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, gentlelady from Hawaii is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I was home, I was asked to explain the payroll tax extension. And as I did it, it was clear to me. The Republicans in the House are toying with the well-being of the working people, the seniors, and our most vulnerable. Everyone will say we support a year's extension. The question is, how do we pay for it? The bipartisan Senate, only 10 voting no, gave us the 2-month extension to do that negotiation. It is time to pass that year's extension. People are watching this House. They want to be sure that we don't limit unemployment insurance benefits to those who only have a high school diploma, because unemployment is an earned benefit for those who are unemployed through no fault of their own, and it would just not be fair. Mr. Speaker, be fair, and do not make our seniors, our most vulnerable, and the middle class pay for the extension, because that just would not be fair. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields back. For what purposes, the gentleman from West Virginia seek recognition. 1 minute, please. Without objection, the gentleman from West Virginia is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, on January 4th, the West Virginia University Mountaineers football team faced the Clemson University Tigers in the prestigious Orange Bowl. Through an outstanding record-setting performance, the blue-collar work ethic of the West Virginia Mountaineers prevailed. 84% of the country had predicted that West Virginia would lose. But in case you missed it, the final score was 70-33. West Virginia's unheralded players proudly showed once again that as a team they can dominate the best of schools on any given day, just like they've done defeating Georgia and Oklahoma in previous BCS bowl games. Everyone in West Virginia should be proud of their state and their flagship university. So let me end with this. For those Clemson supporters who still don't know where West Virginia is, look in your end zone. I yield back my time.
The gentleman yields back. For purpose, the gentleman from Colorado seek recognition.
Extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman from Colorado is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, today many websites across the internet, from Reddit to Wikipedia, have blacked out their sites in protest of a bill before this body, the Stop Online Piracy Act, and its accompanying bill in the Senate, the PIP Act. These bills threaten free discourse, the free speech, and the very infrastructure of the internet itself. The internet has brought this country and the world so much, not only in terms of the millions of jobs and economic productivity of American citizens, but far-reaching changes in terms of the Arab Spring and the voice of freedom desires across the world. SOPA and PIPA directly threaten the very internet that has brought humanity great prosperity and greater peace. I call upon my colleagues to join in solidarity with internet users across the world in making sure that we tackle online piracy in the way that doesn't throw out the baby with the bathwater. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. For what purposes, the gentleman from Colorado seek recognition. Without objection, the gentleman from Colorado is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate following my colleague from Colorado who recognizes the importance of jobs. Unfortunately, the President of the United States has turned a blind eye to the needs of the American people. In my own district, in the state of Colorado, we have 17 counties, according to the Colorado Department of Labor, that have unemployment in excess of 20%. We have an opportunity to create jobs in this country. The Keystone Pipeline will help provide energy certainty for this country in a responsible way, create American jobs on American soil to be able to put American people back to work. Today we hear the President is throwing his hands up and turning his backs on the American people. People deserve better. We must get this economy moving. We must create those opportunities for jobs for the American people. This is our time. This is our opportunity, and we call upon the President to join us in putting Americans first. I yield back.
Gentleman's time's expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Kentucky seek recognition?
Request permission to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, gentleman from Kentucky is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, Muhammad Ali's contributions to the world continue to transcend his achievements in the boxing ring. Although he won 3 heavyweight championships, Muhammad has never believed that resolving differences are needed to do through conflict. He's a man of peace and justice, of patience and grace, a visionary who changed the boxing world so he could change the entire world. In 2005, he founded the Muhammad Ali Center in our hometown of Louisville, Kentucky. The center is a cultural attraction and an international education hub whose work is based on the core values by which Muhammad lives: respect, confidence, conviction, dedication, giving, and spirituality. Yesterday, Muhammad turned 70. Today, I'm introducing the Muhammad Ali Legacy Act to honor his values and build upon his humanitarian work. The legislation establishes a grant program to promote global respect, understanding, and communication. The program will prepare leaders to contribute to global society through peace building and violence prevention and teach young people how to combat the pull of radicalism. I ask my colleagues to join me in supporting this work and the man who has dedicated his life to it by co-sponsoring the Muhammad Ali Legacy Act. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Michigan seek recognition? Without objection, gentleman from Michigan is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate this time to come and report back to this body and to the people of the 2nd District about my very quick but very informative weekend trip to Afghanistan, where I was able to be cautiously encouraged by the progress that the Afghan National Army is taking there. But mainly my goal was to go and say thank you to the men and women of all the different branches and to let them know that they will not be forgotten by me, my constituents, or the rest of us here in this body. I especially want to say thank you to our international partners, the Brits, the Aussies, the Germans, the Dutch, the Romanians, who are there with us along with many others who are pushing this effort forward. I also want to say thank you to the embassy staff for their fine work, the men and women of the Air National Guard who are there sacrificing, especially those men and women from the 82nd Airborne who hosted us in Kandahar, and the Marines at Camp Leatherneck in Helmand Province. And I have to tell you, Mr. Speaker, I now proudly carry this challenge coin given to me by a new friend, a Sergeant Major from Michigan. As I carry this in my pocket every day with me, I want them to know that they will not be forgotten.
Gentleman's time's expired. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Texas seek recognition? Without objection, gentlelady from Texas is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I join my colleague in saying that our troops will not be forgotten. I continue to wear a yellow ribbon, as we're doing in our community in Houston, to welcome home the troops from Iraq. That's why I rise today to challenge those who are in the midst of the presidential campaign to be cautious about ill-conceived and ill-spoken words. When one of the candidates, the governor of Texas, called the leadership of Turkey Islamic terrorists, that Turkey is run by Islamic terrorists, I can assure you that those words are ill-conceived and inappropriate and absolutely wrong. Turkey is one of the United States' strongest allies. It's a member of NATO. It is seeking at this time membership in the European Union, and there is constant dialogue between our country and Turkey. We're encouraging, of course, Turkey's diplomacy or diplomatic efforts to engage with Israel. And frankly, our troops have benefited from some of the needs taken care of through efforts by Turkey. And so I would just encourage that we not pour fuel and fire together, and recognize that Turkey and others of our allies live in very difficult areas, and therefore we need to be part of the solution and not part of the problem. Check your facts. I don't believe the democratic country of Turkey is run by Islamic terrorists. You're wrong, and it is inappropriate. I yield back.
Expired. For purposes, gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition.
My name be removed as a co-sponsor of H.R. 3261.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
For purposes, gentleman from South Carolina seek recognition.
Speaker, by direction of the Committee on Rules, I call up House Resolution 515 and ask for its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report the resolution.
Calendar number 105, House Resolution 515. Resolved, that a motion to proceed with regard to a joint resolution of disapproval specified in subsection A2 of Section 3101A of Title 31 United States Code, A, may be offered even if the joint resolution has not been reported to the House as contemplated by subsection C3 of such section, and B, shall be in order only if offered by the Majority Leader or his designee.
The gentleman from South Carolina is recognized for 1 hour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For the purpose of debate only, I yield the customary 30 minutes to the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Polis, pending which I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
During consideration of this resolution, all time yielded is for the purpose of debate only. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks.
Without objection.
The Budget Control Act of 2011, which was enacted into law on August 2, 2011, authorized the increases in the administration's borrowing authority subject to a joint resolution of disapproval. The law provides for consideration of a joint resolution of disapproval with 2 hours of debate. Amendments to the joint resolution are not permitted under the law. H. Resolution 515 allows the House to consider the resolution of disapproval in the House today rather than tomorrow as currently contemplated in the law. Simply put, we are moving up consideration by 1 day to better accommodate the House floor schedule. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of this rule and the underlying resolution. Mr. Speaker, I stand before you today posing 2 very, very important questions. The first is an issue of scale. Where I come from in North Charleston, South Carolina, we have a little trouble digesting exactly what $1.2 trillion really means. To help get my own head around the number $1.2 trillion, I did a little fact finding. A last-minute flight from Charleston, South Carolina to Washington, D.C. is about $1,100. You can fly back and forth every single day for the next 3 million years in order to spend $1.2 trillion. I'm not sure about anyone else in the chamber, but there aren't too many things I'm planning to do for the next 3 million years. Now that we have a little perspective on what $1.2 trillion really means, the second question is a simple question. Why is it so hard to simply say we can't afford it? Simple question. Why is it so hard to say that we can't afford another $1.2 trillion of debt? Well, I asked my Facebook the same question. Here are 2 questions, 2 responses to the question. What's not to understand? Just cut the darn budget, just like the rest of us have to do. Second response, we the people on an individual level have got to demand less government. It's called courage, the courage to just say no. Mr. Speaker, it's bad enough that through the national health care bill, the Democrats raised taxes on the middle class by $500 billion. And then they raid another $500 billion from Medicare. But now they want to borrow $1.2 trillion. From whom? It's a good question. From whom? Unborn Americans and foreign nations in order to continue borrowing 42 cents on every dollar to spend in 2012. It's just not right, Mr. Speaker. The American people will not stand for the blank check culture of the past, and I, for one, stand with the American people. Once again, Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of this rule and the underlying legislation. I encourage my colleagues to vote yes on this rule and yes on the underlying bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from South Carolina reserves. The gentleman from Colorado is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
I want to thank my colleague for yielding me the customary 30 minutes, and I rise today in opposition to the rule and the bill. Mr. Speaker, what exactly are we doing here? We could be talking about creating jobs for the middle class. We could be talking about a payroll tax cut extension. We could be talking about corporate tax reform, individual tax reform, and most importantly, we could be talking about solving the national deficit, about reducing government spending, about solving the deficit issue. But instead, we're here playing this game of kabuki theater. Rather than pursuing an agenda that isn't a Democratic or Republican agenda, but an American agenda that both sides of the aisle can agree on, we're here playing a counterproductive and absurd game. In fact, not only playing a game, we're replaying a game. We all remember the debt debacle last August that almost shut down federal government and led to a downgrade, potentially increasing interest rates and costing the government billions or hundreds of billions of dollars more in interest payments. For the first time in history, Standard & Poor's downgraded our country's credit rating, citing brinksmanship and political gridlock as motivating factors for their decision. Look, this is all Monday night quarterbacking. It's after the fact. The money has been spent. The money has been sent. 147 Republicans voted in December to spend $915 billion in the appropriations bill, the omnibus appropriations bill. 147 Republicans, $915 billion, all of which was deficit spending. 147 Republicans spent $915 billion in deficit spending. December 17th, that's a Christmas shopping spree, and now the credit card bill has come in January, and here they are saying, we don't want to pay that credit card bill. The answer, Mr. Speaker, is not to spend the money if you're not going to make good on your bills. Every American family knows that. Once the money's spent, it's after-the-fact political finger-pointing, not looking to a solution for our deficit problem. And the Republicans have not put a solution on the table. Even the House Republican budget, the Paul Ryan budget that ends Medicare, creates $5.1 trillion in deficit spending over the next 10 years. $5.1 trillion in deficit spending. How many times will the Republicans have to raise the debt limit to have a deficit of $5.1 trillion? This Congress and the majority of this Congress on the Republican side are addicted to spending, Mr. Speaker, and until they're willing to entertain a real discussion, and the President of the United States, President Obama, has led the way by convening a commission, the Bowles-Simpson Commission, to try to take a bipartisan approach to actually solving the deficit situation. But rather than bringing any of those bills before the House, the Republicans passed a budget that not only ends Medicare, but leads to $5.1 trillion in deficit spending, and as recently as December 17th, spent $915 billion of deficit spending. The entire deficit for this year, essentially, around December 17th, because we had already spent the money that actually came in. And here they are in January, Mr. Speaker, saying they don't want to pay the bills. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Colorado reserves. The gentleman from South Carolina is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I find it quite interesting to hear Mr. Folis, who sounds like a good Republican over there, I must concede. Sounds like a good Republican over there talking about excessive spending. But here's the question. The Democrat-controlled Senate hadn't passed a budget next Tuesday in 1,000 days. And it's laughable that someone on the left would talk about deficit spending since the 3 records on deficit spending have occurred in the last 3 cycles. In FY 2009, a $1.4 trillion deficit. In FY 2010, $1.294 trillion deficit.
Will the gentleman yield?
And under President Obama, in 2011, a $1.299. Let's just round it to $1.3 trillion.
Will the gentleman yield for a moment?
No, sir. But I will yield to my good friend from South Carolina, 3 minutes, Joe Wilson.
The gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Wilson, is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for yielding. I appreciate the leadership of Congressman Tim Scott on this very important issue. As South Carolina votes in the presidential primary on Saturday, our state is grateful for the leadership of Congressman Tim Scott, along with my other colleagues who are on the floor today, Jeff Duncan, Trey Gowdy, Mick Mulvaney. We know that in November of last year, our nation's annual debt reached $15 trillion, and it recently exceeded the value of the entire American economy. Washington's out-of-control borrowing and spending must stop. The President has ignored our nation's spending problem and once again asked Congress to increase the debt ceiling by $1.2 trillion. This request is a chilling reminder of the out-of-control debt, which threatens senior citizens' retirement security and saddles young people with a mountain of debt. The President in February 2009 said the deficit is unsustainable, but then he proceeded to double the year's debt and has since. Our nation's unemployment rate has consistently remained above 8% for 35 months. This is tragic for American families. Instead of offering solutions to reduce spending and decrease taxes to encourage economic growth, the President and the liberal-controlled Senate continue to support legislation calling for massive tax increases and funding for programs that contribute to our growing national deficit, which destroys jobs and hurts American small businesses. Americans have made it clear they expect their elected officials to make meaningful fiscal reforms today so as not to burden future generations with crushing deficits and debts tomorrow. House Republicans have remained committed to our promise by fighting to create jobs and promote job growth in the private sector. Last year, House Republicans passed 35 job-creating bills, most with bipartisan support. Instead of acting on these bills to create jobs, the liberal-controlled Senate refuses to consider most of these pieces of legislation. By passing today's resolution that disapproves of the President's authority to increase the debt limit, Congress can help restore the American people's faith in our nation's government by protecting future generations and limiting Washington's out-of-control borrowing and spending. Instead of giving the President more power to spend more money we do not have, Congress should work together to find ways to reduce spending and put America back on the path to fiscal responsibility, just as Congressman Scott has pointed out families do. I encourage my colleagues to vote in favor of this resolution, and I yield the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Colorado is recognized.
Before further yielding, I yield myself 30 seconds. Mr. Speaker, the gentleman from South Carolina complained about the President's budget. He complained about a lack of budget in the Senate. What he failed to acknowledge is that the budget the Republicans adopted in this body without a single Democratic vote not only ends Medicare, but leads to $5.1 trillion in deficit spending over the next 10 years, several times the deficit over the last 10 years. $5.1 trillion, larger deficit spending than this country has ever had in a 10-year period, was supported and voted on and enacted by the Republicans in this House. Mr. Speaker, I'm proud to yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Andrews.
The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for 3 minutes.
I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my moment.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank my friend for yielding. Mr. Speaker and colleagues, as the Congress meets for the first time in 2012, the people of the country are burdened by a deficit of jobs, a deficit that in our federal budget, and a deficit of hope that things could get better. It is our responsibility to work together to try to make them better. Now, to reduce the deficit of the country, yes, you should restrain spending. The parties came together in August and passed, with about half of each party voting for it, a deficit reduction plan that cut spending in our departments by about 5% each, made reasonable reductions in defense spending and some reasonable reductions in social programs. We should keep those reductions on the books. We think that in reducing the deficit, that the very wealthiest and most successful in American society should have to pay a little bit more of their fair share. Not everyone agrees with that, but we think that's an important part of reducing the deficit. But by far the best way to reduce the deficit is to create jobs for the people of this country. You have a hard time creating jobs when there's a deficit, but you have an impossible time of reducing the deficit when there are no jobs. 132 days ago, the President of the United States came to this chamber and put forward 4 good ideas to create jobs in this country. First, he said that we should cut taxes for middle-class and working Americans. Well, we managed to eke out a 2-month agreement to do that. Let's get to work today in extending that middle-class tax cut for at least the rest of the year. The President then said that we should put people back to work, building science labs in our schools and fixing bridges and roads that need repaired. The Congress hasn't acted on that proposal at all in this House. The President said that we should cut taxes for small business people who hire people, who create jobs. This House has not acted at all on that proposal since September the 8th. The President took due note that as private sector jobs have risen, police officers and teachers and firefighters have lost their jobs in the public sector. And he said to help our states and cities keep police officers on the beat, keep firefighters in the apparatus, keep teachers in the classroom. Let's give some aid to those states and cities to keep those people working. The House has not acted at all on that proposal. Ladies and gentlemen of the House and Mr. Speaker, rather than going through an exercise here where people can pontificate about how much they deeply care about the deficit, let's do something about it. Let's put on the floor of this House each of the President's proposals to create jobs, and let's take a vote. And if I would ask for 30 more seconds.
Okay, the gentleman's recognized.
And to those who say they have better ideas, let's put their ideas on the floor. The American people did not take the month of January off. Neither should we. Let's put these job-creating proposals on the floor, put them to a vote, do our job to help put the American people back to work. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from South Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And one of the comments by my good friend, Mr. Polis from Colorado, was that Republicans were trying to end Medicare. That's a laughable comment. As a matter of fact, it is so laughable that hot off the press, the PoliFact, who finds out whether or not there is truth or not in words. The political lie of the year is that Republicans voted to end Medicare. PoliFact just named the political lie of the year the comment that Republicans voted to end Medicare.
Will the gentleman yield?
Mr. Speaker? No, sir. Mr. Speaker, I yield 3 minutes, however, to the gentleman from South Carolina, Jeff Duncan.
Gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Duncan, is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to ask my colleagues to support House Resolution 98, denying this President the trillion-dollar draw on the nation's line of credit. You know, just because you got the credit limit that you asked for doesn't mean you have to max out the credit card. How dare this President come back for another increase in the nation's debt after the failure of the Super Committee? How dare he? This President did everything he could and successfully stopped the committee from producing any kind of cut to the size and scope of government. And now he wants to kick the can further down the road yet again. Another year, another $1 trillion in debt, Mr. Speaker. What has this administration done to stop the deficit spending that fuels the debt and brings about the need for an increase in the debt ceiling? Nothing. Mr. Speaker, this administration has done absolutely nothing to rein in this federal government. This is the same president whose party controls the other body, and on Tuesday, the United States Senate will mark 1,000 days since they last passed a budget. The same day the President delivers his State of the Union address. What an embarrassment to continuously ask for more debt without even pretending to know how you've budgeted. If this were a private business, Mr. Speaker, it would be bankrupt. This President and sadly this Congress continues to mortgage the futures of our children and our grandchildren, drowning them in a sea of debt. After the failed policy of the President's stimulus package, we are swimming in deficit spending of this President's making. Mr. Speaker, our country stands at over $15 trillion in debt, and after this increase, we'll be over $16 trillion in the red. Congratulations. We've now joined the club of nations whose national debt is larger than our annual national economic output. This is simply unsustainable position, and the only way we'll get our debt under control is to stop the insanity of trillion-dollar-a-year deficit spending. This must stop. And we in this House must be the responsible adults in the room to stop it. Now is not the time to go get another increase in the limit. Now is the time for us to cut up the credit cards and buckle down like millions of American families are doing across this great land. In an economy this difficult, American families have had to tighten their belts, get back to basics, and cut things from their budget. Surely now is the time for the federal government to do the same. Mr. Speaker, I understand the politics here. We'll thump our chest and we'll pass this resolution and we'll say we've done all we can to stop this increase. The other body, led by a party bent on destroying the American dream and taking us down the path of economic ruin to ever greater government dependency, will table this. In the end, the President will get his increase, and we'll spend yet another $1 trillion that our children do not have. But the bill is coming due, Mr. Speaker, and sooner or later we're going to have to stop this debt train from derailing our country. God bless America, and I yield back the balance.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Colorado is recognized.
Before further yielding, I yield myself a minute. Mr. Speaker, to hear the other side, they doth protest too much. Why does a party for whom 147 members voted to spend $915 billion, causing the deficit, which is roughly $1 trillion in size, essentially that $915 billion that they spent on their Christmas spending spree was the deficit, now they're complaining about it? And since the gentleman from South Carolina wasn't kind enough to yield to me, I'd like to ask him on my own time. The gentleman referred to whether or not the ending Medicare was true, and obviously there's been a vital discussion about that. But the other assertion that I made is very factual, and I just wanted to confirm with the gentleman that the Paul Ryan Republican budget that the Republicans passed did indeed contain $5.1 trillion of deficit spending. Is that your understanding as well? Is that true? I yield to the gentleman from South Carolina for an answer.
I do remember that the Paul Ryan budget came in at a number of $1.019 billion in overall spending for the annual year. If you're talking about the 10-year impact of the
reclaiming
Paul
my time, the
Ryan budget,
10-year figure, yield myself additional 30 seconds. The 10-year figure for that deficit from the CBO itself, $5.1 trillion in deficit spending. Again, and the same Republicans who spent $915 billion here in December are, again, saying now that the credit card bill has come due, they somehow don't want to pay it. With that, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to yield 3 minutes to the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Jackson Lee.
Gentlelady from Texas is recognized for 3 minutes.
I thank the gentleman from Colorado. I'd like to tell a fairy tale and the true story of the American people. The fairy tale, of course, is why we're here on the floor, even today, to actually tell a little story to the American people that we are doing something to impact the deficit. The bill we passed in August, of course, responded to the need to raise the debt ceiling to pay America's bills. But in order to cajole and drag our friends on the Republicans on the other side of the aisle, they did things like cut Pell Grants. They required a joint select committee that did not work to reduce the deficit, and of course they wanted us to have these shenanigans on the floor so that the American people could think they're doing their job. But here's the real story of the American people. First of all, the debt that was increased that we're now dealing with, $1.9 million was raised under Ronald Reagan, $1.5 million was raised under George Bush, that is trillion, Bill Clinton $1.4 trillion, and George W. Bush $6.1 trillion. What is the raising of the debt ceiling, which I think most Americans care about? It is responding to the debt that is now held by the public. It is doing our job. It is responding to the fact that the public should not burden America not paying her bills. What kind of bills? Debts that are owed to individuals, to our corporations that our friends say are of great friendship to them, banks, insurance companies, but most importantly, pensions, mutual funds, state and local governments will be left holding the bag because today we want to do a few shenanigans. Mr. Speaker, let me tell you that the Kaiser Foundation is indicated in my own state. 5.6 million Texans are living in poverty, 2.2 million of them children. 17.4% of the households in the state struggle with food insecurity. Not raising the debt ceiling means that the burden falls on those who get up every morning to work. That's a true story of the American people. What else will happen if we don't raise the debt ceiling? 642,500 jobs will be lost. The gross domestic product would decrease by 1%. Unemployment would go up. Every mortgage would increase by $19,175. Stocks would fall. The S&P dropping 6.3%. And every 401k holder would lose $8,860. $16. This is the real story of the American people. I want to stand on their side. I want to acknowledge that together as Republicans and Democrats, rather than writing the fairy tale story that you're seeing today, a resolution of disapproval, can really work together as we have done in years past. 1997, the balanced budget amendment that created the Children's Health Insurance Program, helping children across America to be able to have health insurance. Or get rid of Medicare Part D, passed by the past administration and the Republican Congress. Medicare Part D, any senior will tell you, is one of the most devastating part of their budget, costing them to pay 3 times more for their prescription drugs. We can get rid of that, as the Affordable Care Act did, that we would generate millions and millions of dollars. So fairy tales are supposed to end with a good story. Have an additional.
Yield additional 30 seconds.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Fairy tales are supposed to end